Welcome to Stories from the NNI. I'm Lisa Friedersdorf, Director of the National Nanotechnology Coordination Office. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Carol Lynn Alpert, Co-Director of the Center for Integrated Quantum Materials and Director of the Strategic Projects Group at the Museum of Science in Boston. In these roles, she provides communication training and develops innovative public engagement activities in collaboration with science and engineering researchers, their students, and postdocs. Carol Lynn, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. To get things started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you first got involved in science communication?
I had a really great high school biology teacher in Maryland where I grew up. His name was Ron Smetanek, and he engaged a group of us sophomores in going out in the field and studying our local watershed. We were wearing waders and doing samples and tests, and he was helping to create a new research-based biology curriculum for high school students. Doing ecological field research really hooked me. I was already active in the environmental movement, and it was something I could do to learn more and maybe have an impact on protecting our water systems. And when I was a junior in high school, I participated in an NSF research program in oceanography for high school students at the University of Rhode Island. And after my senior year, I interned in medicine and ethnography at the Gajicek lab at NIH. So when I got to Harvard, I started by pursuing a degree in biology, but I became increasingly interested in the history and societal impacts of science. And when I graduated, I became a science and history documentary film producer. So I learned how to shape a science story for national television. I worked on NOVA's American Experiences and a special PBS series, War and Peace in the Nuclear Age, and also one called Race to Save the Planet. And then the Museum of Science in Boston invited me to come work with them to design a new kind of museum space, a current science and technology center, where we would try to join together the ideas of television science journalism and museum exhibits and programs. And it worked quite well, and it won some awards, and it gave me the opportunity to be intimately engaged with audiences rather than be distanced by television broadcast technology. And then in order to bring current science and technology to our audiences, we began to work quite closely with university-based researchers in our community, many of them NSF funded. And looking at the science now from this other viewpoint, from outside the academy, I began to see how much scientists themselves could learn about being better communicators with each other. And that's when we began to design communication coaching programs for them.
Wow, that sounds like so much fun, honestly. Nanotechnology naturally sits at the intersection between disciplines, and sometimes the communication from researcher to researcher even is not completely clear. What are your thoughts on the importance of effective communication in collaborative projects?
You're entirely correct about that. When I first got involved in nanoscience and engineering, it's when the museum joined with Harvard and MIT, the first year that the nanoscale science and engineering centers were funded by NSF. And I began sitting in many transdisciplinary research meetings and conferences in which it began to be pretty clear that even if I was having some problems understanding the talks, I wasn't the only one, that there were other faculty and students in the room who were not able to make out much of what the speaker was saying or even showing on the screen. And don't get me started on why we tolerate slides that only people in the first few rows can see. But the bigger point is that thousands of PIs train their students to make scientific presentations that can only be understood by people inside a very narrow field, maybe on their own hallway. And this has become accepted as just part of scientific culture. And it really shouldn't be. The evidence shows that a high degree of innovation occurs at the boundaries between disciplines, and so it's critically important that researchers and their trainees become aware of and practice more inclusive communication skills.
What about talking to the general public? How is that different than the communication between scientists?
I think the difference is less distinct than most people would think. I wrote a paper a couple of years ago called The Research Communication Continuum, linking public engagement skills to the advancement of cross-disciplinary research. And I really do believe they are linked because at the core, it's really about being aware of who your audience is and what kind of orientation they may need to be able to absorb the significance of the information you're sharing with them. So whether they are a scientist specializing in another field or visitors to a science museum, they need to be given an appropriate orientation to your work and how it relates to the larger questions or challenges that they can connect to. Like public audiences, scientific collaborators in other areas of expertise may also need an introduction to the way you look at materials and systems and the tools that you use and the jargon of your field. And I think many people are worried about doing this because it just may seem too simplistic. But it goes a long way in being able to include more thinkers in the work.
So, can you share your thoughts about the challenges associated with communicating specifically about nanotechnology?
In the beginning, for public audiences, the main challenge is really engaging their interest. And I think that's true for every field. I mean, some fields just naturally seem sexy, but nanotechnology is a broad umbrella term defined by a size scale, and that's not in itself enough to hook people's interest. So people want to know, why should I care? What does it have to do with my life? So the way to hook people's interest is it's the individual stories of discovery, the aha moments, the applications, the breakthrough solutions to big challenges that can capture an audience's attention. But we have nevertheless worked out ways over the last decade and a half to be successful in engaging public audiences with some unusual approaches beyond exhibits and presentations. For instance, the amazing Nano Brothers Juggling Show, which is a 45-minute comedy performance, and it's been highly successful in introducing over 120,000 people to nanoscience and to basic physics. We were able to validate educational gains among adults, children, and middle school students with an independent research study. And then for several years, we produced live 3-minute New England cable news stories reaching people in 5 New England states. And we were able to show in a carefully designed research study that home viewers actually found them more engaging than local news, sports, and weather. And that's not something you would predict.
So, both of those examples that you just provided, the cable news stories and the amazing Nano Brothers Juggling Show, are those clips available online somewhere?
Yes, if you go to a YouTube channel called Nano Nerds, all of these are on there along with many wonderful presentations by guest researchers who we've worked with to make the concept simpler for a public audience.
So, you talked about the aha moments and individual stories and reaching people or showing them how it can impact their personal lives or what it has to do with them. Can you share some tips that you have for scientists and ways that they might be able to improve their communication skills?
The first thing, of course, is understand who you're speaking to and what sort of orientation they'll need to care about your work. If they're a public audience, then you may want to begin by cluing them into why they might care about the subject you're tackling. If it's a scientific audience, give them enough context to understand what you're doing and how it might connect with broader goals that you share. And with any audience, try to begin by engaging them personally. Speak slowly, make eye contact. And then, this is hard, but try to limit yourself to a few big takeaway messages that you make very clear. You don't have to share all the details and all the data because they can always ask for more later. And it's very important, if you use slides, to use them as illustrations for your talk rather than as notes. I see so many people getting stressed out when they're watching a presentation between, am I supposed to be reading what's on the slides and trying to interpret the axes on the graph, or should I be listening to what you're saying? And those are two very different mental activities. So what we really want to do is use them to mutually reinforce one understanding at a time, to sort of unite the sight and sound to enhance cognition rather than the cognitive dissonance that comes from trying to read and listen at the same time. So we recommend that you show only what you are speaking about at that moment in time, and do not cram text and multiple images and graphs on slides. Make your goal to make everything you put on the screen visible to everyone in the audience, including the people in the back. So that means using more slides and full screen images. I know many professors like to have a rule of thumb where they say 1 slide per minute, or this is a 10-slide talk. But in reality, that should not be the measure of a talk, because that tends to have people cramming more information on each slide. Maybe this is something that comes from my background in television production, but you don't split up the screen into 5 different things with different things going on. You have one narrative and one visual that are moving together in unison, and that's how you can have a cognitive impact on your audience.
Well, I think those are great tips. I want to talk to you a little bit about the competition that you've run. So, the Museum of Science in Boston has organized a Quantum Matters Science Communication Competition for the past 2 years. Can you tell us a little bit about this competition?
Yes, we're doing a lot in quantum education right now in collaboration with the Center for Integrated Quantum Materials, which is based at Harvard, at MIT, and Howard University, and also the Museum of Science. And we're kind of where we are with quantum, where we were with nano about 15 years ago. We are learning how to best communicate about quantum science and technologies with broader audiences. So we launched the Quantum Matter Science Communication Competition as a way of encouraging quantum researchers to help us discover new ways of engaging folks in grasping an intuitive understanding of quantum materials and quantum behavior and some of the potential of new quantum technologies. So we put out a call and asked anyone who wanted to submit, anyone who was a researcher in this area, to submit a talk. We selected 4 finalists, and we invited them to come to our Nano Days with a Quantum Leap event. That's what we've rebranded our Nano Days as, and to compete before a live family audience. They each had 3 minutes to explain a basic quantum concept relating to their research. And we had audience voting as well as a panel of 4 distinguished judges. It was really a blast. The film of the 2018 competition won 2 Telly Awards, and the film of the 2019 competition was released just a couple of months ago. And you can find them on that Nano Nerds YouTube channel, and also at mos.org/QMC2018 and /QMC2019.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun and also really impactful as we're learning more about quantum science and helping people wrap their head around some of these complex concepts. So, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. I just want to ask in closing, do you have any parting thoughts that you would like to share with our listeners?
I'd just like to encourage researchers to have fun and go out and interact with public audiences and practice different ways of explaining what you do and why you're excited about it. Many of the researchers that I've worked with have found it an amazingly uplifting experience, a very valuable and exhilarating experience to share what they do with broader audiences.
Thank you for joining us today for Stories from the NNI. If you would like to learn more about nanotechnology, please visit nano.gov or email us at info@nnco.nano.gov. And check back here for more stories.